The Pains of Sleep. In the poem, The Pains of Sleep, Coleridge presents sleep as a traumatic experience based on his substance withdrawal. The poem is not just about insomnia, it's about feeling deep, spiritual anguish where the mind is too troubled by itself to be able to properly rest. More than the physicality of getting to sleep, Coleridge explores the psychological thought processes of getting to sleep, rest and peace, showing how these can be disrupted when the mind is burdened with stress and anxiety. The poet, who suffered a number of physical ailments at a young age, grew tolerant of the medication he used as they contain opium, which is highly addictive. This poem is about the misery in the cycle of addiction and withdrawal. It is a testament to how addiction can reduce a person to a life of agony and shame. Coleridge first introduces his religious guilt with the line, "It hath not been my use to pray." The speaker states that he prays before going to sleep due to the guilt of his substance addiction. As the poem is a written record of battle with the effects of his addiction. It is literally a life and death struggle for him, reducing him physically, emotionally and psychologically to the point of despair and agony. The first 3 lines of the first stanza are visual imagery that exposes the condition of the speaker. The use of words, like limbs, lay, lips, and knees above are indicating the key concepts of conveying the condition of the speaker. To take a deeper notice, the words limbs and lay suggest, a man who lays himself, but it carries the association of strength, a mental picture of a man who manifests that he is so feeble and powerless. Then, the words lips and knees picture an image that moving lips and bended knees are indicating a man with his time to pray. Moreover, these words carry another association. It can suggest human nature which shows inadequate power to dedicate to the Lord. Moreover, the next 3 lines are likely to answer the condition of the speaker in what the third lines explained that he recognized. There is an immortal strength and wisdom which bless the speaker, and this condition leads to his weakness. Thus, associations lead to depict an atmosphere of gentleness and calmness. In the line, "In humble trust mine eyelids close," the poet suggests that every night when he closes his eyes to surrender himself to sleep, he places his faith in God, resigning his control over his own life as he is allowing for himself to be in the most vulnerable state possible. The humble trust is displayed as trusting in the higher powers, with his strong belief and loyalty in God. Coleridge then describes the man with reverential resignation that conveys the sense of constancy and purity of his impression. These kinds of supplication over soul impression resuscitate consciously that these lead him to weakness. The alliteration of reverential resignation, coupled with its use of polysyllabic lexis, makes the phrase stand out. It creates an impression of the speaker as a humble, suppliant and spiritual person who is generally honest and open to receiving spiritual guidance, which contrasts with the later stanzas when he is plagued by nightmares and horrific visions. There is a semantic field of religious undertones predominantly in stanza 1 of this poem, with bended knees, pray, spirit, my soul, and blessing. The poet presents his internal turmoil between spirituality and Christianity. Moving on from the holy atmosphere from the first stanza, Coleridge disrupts it in the second and third stanzas. With the line, "The fiendish crowd of shapes and thoughts that tortured me," the implied metaphor gives human qualities to emotionless objects. The comparison is illogical, which makes it more frightening. The ambiguity of shapes and thoughts adds to the element of the unknown. The adjective fiendish is used again in the last stanza describing the fiendish dream. This gives demon-like quality to his dream and pictures any oppression and transforms into remembrance, which leads to bad treatment or unpleasantness. The last stanza means that even though the speaker suffers so much pain and regrets so much about his deeds. The line, lurid light a trampling throng, uses short syllabic structures that convey a fast pace that associates the feeling of distress. It is an unnatural moment as, lurid, highlights the glaring scene, which is in contrast to the darkness and turmoil from the speaker's nightmare. It suggests that the light signifies the judgment on him and he has nowhere to hide. In the line, but wherefore fall on me, the antithesis of wide blessing and worst calamity heighten the intense emotions of the speaker even further in this phrase as we realize his world has become inverted. Typically a time of peace and rest, the prospect of a night's sleep becomes a terrifying and troubling experience that is always worried about during the day. The epizeuxis of wherefore is particularly emphatic, as if the word wherefore, why, for what reason, is circling continually around the speaker's head. He cannot understand why he has been tortured by nightmares and awful thoughts. In the line, "I wept as I had been a child," the speaker is reduced to a childlike state of helplessness and starts crying because he is entirely unable to combat the emotions and thoughts that he feels. This perhaps implies the way in which mental health issues such as insomnia, depression and anxiety can be highly disempowering for the individual who suffers, leaving them feeling as though they are both helpless and useless. Coleridge also presents overtones of unrequited love in his message in the last two lines of the poem. With the line, "To be loved is all I need," the poet shows his need to receive love, and he bears the pains in solitude with no company. This is his response to fight against his drug addiction and the pain that causes. The final line, "And whom I love indeed," shows a confident tone. Through the use of repetition he still maintains love, despite the unrequited love, although he clearly suffers from it. This is his final conclusion after going through the emotional and physical turmoil caused by his substance use. In the end, like his own Ancient Mariner, Coleridge did recover that capacity to give and receive love, and indeed returned to a full and profoundly held faith in Christ as the one, the only one, who could come down into the midst of his pain and set him free. He wrote some brilliant theology from the standpoint of that recovered faith, but it seems to me that it is his notes along the way, his frank cries of despair and longing, that can most help his fellow pilgrims now. The poem is structured into 3 stanzas that increase in length as the speaker becomes more stressed and distraught from his inability to sleep or rest properly. The rhyme scheme begins with a kind of regularity, using AABB rhyming couplets to show a sense of peace and harmony as the speaker describes his nightly prayer ritual, which leaves him in a state of peace and humility as he feels the safety and protection of a higher power. In the first stanza, the rhyme scheme is once disrupted, which switches for a moment to alternate rhyme, a bob, before going back to rhyming couplets, creates a slightly off-kilter rhythm where the regularity and order are disrupted. This perhaps is a method of foreshadowing the later turmoil that is to come in the later stanzas with the speaker's night terrors. The second stanza uses a more erratic mixture of alternate rhyme and couplets, switching several times between the two as the speaker's mental state deteriorates and his nightly prayers and rest are disrupted by horrid thoughts and visions. The final stanza is a little more regular and mostly couplets, but with one shift to alternate rhyme. The meter of the poem appears to be iambic tetrameter, 4 feet of iambs, unstressed, stressed syllables, per line. At times, the lines hyperextend to 9 syllables per line instead of the usual 8, again emphasizing the sense of disharmony, unbalance and disrupted routine. Speaking in the first-person perspective, the speaker, Coleridge himself, gives us a personal account of his nightly sleep ritual. He prays before going to bed, but not aloud and not in a demanding way, more in a meditative state where he shifts his mind to a state of love, and tries to empty it of wishes and desires, instead humbly accepting that he is weaker than the higher power to which he prays. The following state of mental anguish and turmoil is confusing for the speaker. He seems to feel that it is unfair for a man such as him, a humble and honest man, to be plagued by traumatic visions, as he does not see the reason for such turmoil in his life. The title can be interpreted in several ways. It is difficult or painful for him to sleep, as the process is upsetting, or otherwise sleeping gives him pains, as during the night he is troubled by nightmares and placed into a state of suffering.